and Christina have cards. Feel free to write a question either now or at any time over the course of the evening, and hand it to the organizer, and we'll go through those and ask audience questions at the end. My name is Elena Wilson. I'm with the Boulder Community Housing Association. We are a network of both legal and underground housing cooperatives, as well as our members include some of the co-housing units and other individuals in the community who are interested in sharing. One of the big things that we do is organize food purchases collectively. In 2014, we bought about $100,000 worth of food together. We also organize kind of trainings and workshops on nonviolent communication, meeting facilitation, and do a lot of education and outreach, and we're really excited to be a part of the forum today. I'm going to pass it over to Brenda Lyle of the Family Learning Center.
Hi, my name is Brenda Lyle. I'm the Executive Director for the Family Learning Center. We focus on primarily low-income and moderate-income issues of inclusion and diversity in education and family development throughout Boulder County. Specifically, we're located in the city of Boulder.
Hi everyone, I'm Darren O'Connor. I'm with Boulder Rights Watch, and our vision statement is, our vision is a city that leads by example in recognizing the value of all community members, including our unhoused neighbors. We endeavor to tap the capabilities, talents, and experiences of Boulder's housed and unhoused citizens to creatively and lovingly address the needs of those living without a permanent place to call home. Throughout the process, our city will acknowledge and respect the rights of everyone that collectively calls Boulder home. I just want to share briefly with you that in 2014, in August, prior to Council's study session on the 10-year plan to end homelessness, we produced an action plan to address homeless issues in Boulder. There were 6 issues: establish a daytime storage center for use of the homeless community members, number 2 was create a year-round comprehensive day center. 3 was address the issue of housing for our poorest community members. 4 was create year-round homeless shelter capacity. 5 was implement a public education campaign. And 6 was develop a community response teams that could replace or assist police in showing up in a more caring manner. So look forward to hearing from you all tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Neil Buccio, and I'm here with Boulder SURJ, as well as Jez, who I don't see. Jez is okay. And let's see, we're about a 9-month new organization. We're a local chapter of a national organization. SURJ stands for Showing Up for Racial Justice. The mission of our organization is to educate and organize white people to be present to issues that are facing people of color. And so we are acting up and organizing locally and kind of regionally with Denver for social action and political action to make Boulder and Denver a place that's more livable, inclusive, affordable, and just for people of color, and for white people, because we think that by doing this work, we'll create equity and equality. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Maury Bean, and actually wearing 2 hats tonight. One is a member of the First Congregational Church, so I'd like to, without being too evangelical, just welcome you. And I'll have to tell you, actually, just as much as I love what happens in the sanctuary, I'm a member of the choir, and the liturgy's great, and it's an open and affirming church. The real fun action is in meetings like this tonight down here. And so, my other role is being a member of BCAR, the Boulder Coalition and Alliance on Race, and I wish Jen Watson were here. Many of you know her. She's got a class tonight, the co-founder of BCAR. And I couldn't find the mission statement, but sure enough, I found one of her quotes, and it says that we practice nonviolent communication, critical thinking, learning, and most importantly, activism. And I'd mentioned that we're busy reinventing ourselves, like all good organizations should do. And so I'd welcome you. We meet the first Monday and the second Tuesday of every month here at the church. And if whoever are members of BCAR that are here would like to stand up just so that everybody can see who we are and you're certainly welcome to talk to any of us about being members and joining us. So, again, welcome.
Thank you all, and thanks again to the candidates for being here.
I'm a little late.
Yeah, come on in. I do just want to note that, our forum tonight is the same time as the city council meeting, so there are 2 incumbents who are running for re-election who responded to our 9 questions that they received in advance. And you can read their responses from Tim Plass and Zan Jones at the back. They're available at the table, so please check those out.
And also, Bill Rigler, he's going to respond.
Okay, yeah, and Bill Rigler will send responses, and we'll have these all posted on the forum website at bocha-neighbors.org. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderators for the evening.
Hey, thanks. I'm Kelly. I work at a local nonprofit here in Boulder, and I also grew up here, so I'm super stoked to be a part of this process. So I'll just explain how we're going to go about the forum. So basically we have about 9 questions here that we're hoping to get through. We're going to just open it up. We'll read off the question, and then we'll open it up for stacking. Does everyone know what stacking is? So we'll, basically what we'll do is people will raise their hand, and as they raise their hand, we'll write down your names, and we'll keep track of who's talking. Each person will have up to a minute to speak. And at that time, we will cut you off. We'll be raising our hand 10 seconds before your time is over, and then we will ask you to wrap up your thoughts at that point. And we only have up to 10 minutes for every question, so we'll have to end the conversation at 10 minutes to make sure that we can move on to the next part, which will be questions from the audience. Do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
So, hi everyone, I'm also moderating tonight. My name is Alicia Conti, and I work for a local nonprofit based out of Longmont, and I'm really excited to be here. Should we go down?
Yeah, so we're just going to have you all introduce yourselves really quickly. Just first and last name is probably great, and then we'll get to the questions. That way we can also keep track of who's speaking.
Hi, I'm Don Cody.
Evening, I'm Jan Burton.
Julie McCabe.
I'm Bob Yates.
And Jabari.
Comrade Keith Percy.
Tasha Spinrad.
Aaron Brockett.
Jyotsna Raj.
Michael Krujek.
Great. Awesome, thank you so much. And so Alicia will begin with the first question. Like I said, she'll finish the question. You can feel free to start raising your hands at that point. And we'll be taking stat, and we'll be keeping track of who will be next. And if you could just pass the mic down to the person, we'll let you know who that person is after you finish speaking, if you're the first one to speak. So after your minute is over, just pass it to the next person, we'll let you know who that is.
Great. All right. So the first question has to do with housing the unhoused. Boulder's 10-year plan to end homelessness has become the 10-year plan to address homelessness. And while the intentions of the city and volunteers involved in this effort are good, by the city's own admission, our community is far from solving the problem. With the ongoing rise in Boulder's cost of housing, more people may be at risk of losing access to housing for economic reasons. Unfortunately, there are often barriers to assistance. If a family wants help from organizations like EFA, there can be minimum income requirements, leaving many families without options. So this is the question. Imagine that a group of advocates has identified an existing building which could be repurposed as a rooming house providing housing, food, and utilities for families at $750 a month without violating any of the city's health and safety codes. However, the property would run afoul of existing occupancy limits and minimum parking requirements. At a public meeting to discuss this potential solution, both nearby residents and unhoused families who would benefit from the project speak in favor of it. How would you proceed? Dawn, hold on a second. This is gonna be hard. All right. Let's just.
You said there's 10 minutes of questions?
Yeah.
There's only 10 of us.
Let's just go down. We'll just go down the line. And Kelly will keep time.
Well, fine. I'm still Don Cody. And I think the people who were putting in this proposal together were really making their sense. They did their homework. They got the people involved to be there at the meeting and to agree on it. So from the council standpoint, what I would do obviously is propose an exemption in their case and speak in favor of it to try and get it moving along.
So it sounds like everyone supports this. I think that I would ask the staff to do some further analysis to just verify the costs and other pros and cons that would come up from anyone other than these two groups. But it looks like it would be a very good business solution.
So I'm in favor of re-examining occupancy limits in the city of Boulder, and to me this would be a prime example of a place that those should be re-examined. And secondly, I've been running consistently on a transportation platform. My proposal would include buying local urban service, which would give the city of Boulder free transportation on RTD buses. The reason why I think this is a good idea is because I favor density, but not increased cars. I think if these properties are going to come in with increased density, that they must have a solution that does not include parking.
This is Bob Yates. I'm already on record for increasing occupancy limits, not just in the hypothetical we're talking about, but across the city. I think that we need to really look at this kind of silly rule we have about 3 to 4 people per house. I don't really quite understand the origin of that, the need for that, the basis for that. And so I would actually not only grant a waiver or permission for this particular house in the hypothetical, I would actually like to see this across the city.
I'm Ed Jabari. I'm adamantly opposed to the current occupancy limits, and I've spoken publicly at City Council on that. I find them discriminatory against several demographic groups, and they're most likely unconstitutional. The question doesn't really indicate if the project is funded or whether there are, or how many cars there would be. So those are important details to really answering this question. But under the current rules, I'd advocate for a transparent and inclusive public process, and using several forms of outreach and clearly present both the potential impacts and benefits of the project. And if it has great support, advocate proceeding and fast tracking through the zoning and exemptions that would need to happen for that. If I propose limiting the number of vehicles to 1 per family in this hypothetical case, and if there's significant opposition, I'd look at the issues, look for solutions, and challenge the developers to make it acceptable to the neighborhood.
When the problem is parking over people, we have to favor people, and especially if those people are unhoused and trying to become housed. Our occupancy limits in Boulder don't do that. Very often you have very large houses that could easily fit more than 3 or 4 unrelated people that just don't because they're not allowed to, or they do it illegally, and then they have the risk of wondering if they're safe in their own community, and if they do have a community, or if their neighbors are going to get them in trouble at the first sign of disagreement. So this is a situation where we need to smash the occupancy limit. It doesn't work, and we need to behave like adults and do what works as adults. And we can all do that together without, saying it must be 4. And in that case, we move it along.
So I'm going to stand up so everyone can see. So I hope that this wouldn't happen because I hope to, like Keith was saying, smash the occupancy limits. I would like to remove the occupancy limits. And I would like to remove parking restrictions that make it difficult for developers to make environmentally friendly projects and projects for people without cars. So provided that we haven't gotten that far yet, I would do whatever I can to grant an exemption to this project and to get transportation staff to think about what they can do as far as parking, if parking became an issue, which it might not. I wouldn't think it would be.
I'm going to stand as well. Aaron Brockett here. This is exactly the kind of housing solution that we need in the city. Housing prices are getting extraordinarily high. It's very difficult for the young people and families to stay in town. And we need to look at solutions like this and like co-ops, which I think are a phenomenal solution for people to live together in community, with low housing costs. Personally, I live in Wild Sage co-housing in the north part of town, which is a little bit less intense form of community, but also a form of intentional community. It's a wonderful way to live. So I'd really like us to see us adjust our fundamental regulations to make things like this much easier to do. But this particular hypothetical is a nice softball question because you got the neighbors engaged and in favor of it, so absolutely we should allow things like this. And then if there are potential impacts, we should just regulate on the impacts, not on the housing itself. We should make this kind of stuff easy.
Well, for me, the operative thing in this is that the neighbors are in agreement with the people who want to live in this situation. And I think this is exactly the kind of engagement I would like. Engage the neighbors, see what they find acceptable, and allow these kind of housing solutions to emerge for people who are unhoused. I do think we should look at the transportation impacts and see to it that there are not too many cars, and providing easy access to transportation is a good thing for everybody in the community. I myself grew up in India in what is called an extended family situation. We call it a joint family in India. And I can tell you it has enormous advantages to everyone. My mother could go back to work because my grandmother and my aunt were at home to look after me. So I see this as a good thing.
Michael Krujek, I think the hypothetical aside, I've already come out in support of occupancy limit increases. I just think they're a good thing, whether it happens to be for seniors, whether it happens to be for young folks, whether it happens to be for unhoused people. I think it's a good solution.
Hey, I'm Jared. Sorry I'm late. The truck broke down, but I made it. Anyway, I think we're on the first question here, so I'm going to try and catch up here. Anyway, ideally, we really need to destroy the occupancy limit law that's going on in the city. I mean, if we want to encourage growth, we need to encourage growth? I don't know, it's a crazy idea, but the way we're going to do this is to start with occupancy limits and go from there. And I know a lot of people are really concerned with parking limitations and things like that, but believe it or not everyone owns a car, and when you put so many people in one house, they tend to carpool and do crazy things like that, and, you know, go to the grocery store together and actually work as a community within a community. So really the first thing we need to do is get rid of the occupancy limits that we have.
Great, so we have 3 minutes for responses. Does anyone have a response to the remarks? Time for 3.
I just want to clarify my response because I was reading about the 10-year plan to end homelessness. I definitely agree with what everyone has said about co-housing. I am a big supporter of co-housing, and I think we should change our zoning for that.
I think the question basically said the supporters of the project came out and some of the neighbors were asked too, but it wasn't really robust and inclusive, at least in the question of the public input process. So, you know, I definitely want to see that before doing anything with it. There could be a lot of people functioning that weren't even aware of what's going on.
Last comment. So I would like to make it clear that I'm not saying get rid of occupancy limits altogether. We need to engage any neighborhood in this discussion, and if this seems like a viable option for them, I think it can be a viable option for all the people involved.
Okay, so we'll do the same thing again. I'll read the question. If everyone has a response, we can just go down the line, but we would like to encourage room for debate. So if you don't have an initial response, feel free to not raise your hand right away and then wait for to be able to respond to people. So this question is on the camping ban. The Department of Justice recently submitted a legal brief in Boise, Idaho case that stated that camping bans, like Boulder's, as well as other anti-vagrancy and quality of life laws which criminalize activities such as sleeping that are a necessary part of being human, are a violation of the 8th Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause. City Attorney Tom Carr recently stated that Boulder should not be concerned with the DOJ's position because it will take years for the issue to reach the U.S. Supreme Court, and any action taken with respect to Boise's ordinance will have no effect on Boulder until the Supreme Court issues a decision. In addition, he recently stated that his office loses approximately half of the camping cases that they take to trial, although his office persists in enforcing the no camping ordinance. What is your opinion of the city's camping ban? And if you're not happy with it, what steps would you propose to deal with the issue?
1, 2, 3, okay.
So the Department of Justice is absolutely right that it's inhumane, it violates human rights, it violates basic dignity. The city attorney is absolutely wrong when he says we can sit on our hands and wait for people to suffer and wait for the Supreme Court to notice. I've worked with the DOJ in disability rights, and I'll tell you, by the time they know there's a problem, there's a big problem. And we've had people freeze to death, so we've got a big problem, and there's no time to wait. We need to immediately overhaul the camping ban. We need to set up homeless Bill of Rights. We need to have some place for people to go. And we need to understand that the police are not going to be people's first choice when they're vulnerable, when they're poor, when they're homeless, when they're hungry. So punishment, punitiveness is not going to be people's first choice, and we need to look at that.
Cha-Cha, and I think Jan
So I'm completely against the camping ban. I think that Keith was right on with all the reasons to be against it. In addition, I think that Boulder needs to go beyond just repealing the camping ban and actually passing the right to rest to give people without housing the basic rights that they need to live, to be able to eat and sleep in public.
So I'll have to stand on this. I live in the 500 block of Arapahoe, and many of the homeless are my neighbors. My husband and I debate this, but I call them my neighbors. Having said this, on the south side of the creek between 6th and 9th Street Bridge, on many occasions there are extreme hobo camps. These hobo camps are not appropriate. They take open space that we pay for and they turn it into trash dumps. It is awful to see our police, which currently are the people dealing with the problem, probably 60,000 a year employees out cleaning up after people who are basically addicted and alcoholic and cannot get into homeless shelters. There has to be a different solution than this, and it is certainly not to turn the central area of Boulder into a hobo camp. I was one of the first to start sending photos to council of pictures of what that Central Park area looked like, which was denuded, filled with cigarette butts and trash. That is not the way to save Boulder. I agree with Cha-Cha, and I agree with Keith.
Okay. Ed is next, sorry.
I oppose the camping ban. As I understand it, currently people can sleep outside, but if they have any kind of sleeping bag or blanket, they can be prosecuted at that point. That's a health and safety issue. There should be no doubt about that part of it. I think I could support limitations on camping, but only if we had enough shelters and even open spaces where we're designated that are accessible to people to be able to sleep outside as well. That would be the only case I would support it. And I don't want to see people suffering unduly because other people want to ignore the problem of homelessness. I'd like to look at all of our anti-vagrancy related ordinances and make sure they're not discriminating and those that we have no enforcement without a solution. And I'm also a proponent of making the city attorney's position an elected position.
Thank you. Just a reminder to keep an eye on us when we raise our hand. That means you have 10 seconds left. And also, audience members, just make sure that you're writing down questions on the note cards if you have them.
I think it is cruel to expect people on a really cold winter night not even to have a blanket or a comforter to shelter themselves. So I do not approve of this at all. We should provide housing or at least shelter for people on the coldest nights of the year. I was one of the founding board members of BoCHA, which does exactly that. That it opens up places of worship, like perhaps this church participates in it as well, that opens up places of worship for homeless people on the coldest nights so that they will not freeze out on the streets and will not be persecuted for that either. And these people are accepted regardless of whether they are drunk or on drugs or whatever, because it doesn't matter how your condition is, you're going to freeze and die if you're going to be exposed to the elements. So I do not support this kind of punitive action against homeless people, but nevertheless, we should not use Central Boulder as a place where they go because they have no other recourse.
Hi, Amber. I do not support punitive action on homeless people. I think they are in a situation they don't want to be in, and I don't think that's a compassionate way to do it. and Boulder is better than that. We should make it a high priority to find or create housing, some sort of housing or shelter for the homeless, and especially the ones that are from here. I've been told that the police know the names of 300 homeless here who are from here, and we should be trying to help solve their problems, and it should be a very high priority.
Aaron Brockett, not to repeat what I agree with people that have already said. I think it's certainly cruel and unusual to essentially criminalize being human. So I think that's a law that has to change in town. To me, the answer to these questions is providing services. It's not about enforcing inhumane laws. So I think it's critical that we get the homeless organizations in town, Bridge House, the shelter, and BoCHA, to work together and coordinate their services such that we make sure that there's always a safe, dry place for folks when things are cold outside. So I think if we always have that place, then we could work with a task force or a citizens action group like has been discussed, to make sure that people have a safe place to go and that we get folks who need the services into the services rather than attempting to ticket them.
Thank you. I just wanted to say a couple things about, we don't have to wait for the Supreme Court to act. We need to be looking at our own moral compass as to what we do. And I don't think it's right to criminalize the acts that are occurring there. And I know we probably all feel the same about finding shelter in the winter. But many of these people are going to be outside in the summer as well. And we need to look at setting aside areas somewhere that they can find a home.
Again, my name is Bob Yates. I actually got to know several of the unhoused people in the community. My office is actually right across the street from this building, and so I come over here to Bridge House from time to time at lunch hour and get to know some of the folks that are here long-term, some of the folks that are passing through, and each one of them has a human story. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, we've made a little progress in the last year or two with the 3 organizations that Aaron mentioned coming together, but I think that maybe we were at a 2 when we moved to about a 3 or 4. We have a long, long ways to go, both for housing people and structures. And for those who like to camp, I used to be chairman of the Parks Board. We have 91 parks in this town, 91 parks. Perhaps we could take 1 or 2 of them and set them aside as a campground for those who want to camp.
I actually put that in my platform.
Michael Krutec, I'm not supportive of the camping ban. I actually think that the enforcement is counterproductive. My understanding of what happens is that the homeless get arrested, they get their goods taken, their sleeping bags and all of their products taken from them, and then they are released because they can't be held because they're not going to be prosecuted. And so what we end up with is somebody who's now out on the street without the things that they had previously to go ahead and protect themselves. They also have, if they've been found guilty, then they end up with a misdemeanor because they can't pay the ticket. And so then if they are actually not addicted or not to substances, then they can't get jobs because they've got a misdemeanor against them. So I think that the whole cycle is a very counterproductive cycle that we're working with, and it needs to be fixed.
Alicia, let me say one thing.
We're going to come back and then we're going to close it out.
Yeah, firstly, we definitely need to get rid of the camping ban. This is an ordinance that punishes people who have already been punished enough. Setting up a campsite is great, but we should set up more than just one campsite and allow for, people to hang in the public parks that we pay for in the first place. With that aside, we do need to put more money into our social services for the homeless and just for people that are less fortunate than a lot of people in Boulder. And we need to do this by looking at other things like psychological things, not just the transition from being homeless to not being homeless is not an easy path, and some people have a harder struggle than others. And with addiction in mind and with all these other things, we need to be helping people, not hurting people. We need to be setting an example for the rest of the United States, not waiting for the problem to reach here, like Conrad Keith and a few others have pointed out. Waiting for the problem to reach here is going to create a bigger problem in the end.
Thanks, everyone. That's the question.
Great. So the next question has to do with welcoming minorities and immigrants in our community. So the Knight Foundation's recent Soul of the Community study looked at community in Boulder and found that a majority of residents did not feel attached to others in the city. It also found that minorities and immigrants do not feel that they are welcome here as an integral part of the broader community. People of color have also shared with BCAR that they experience racism spanning from microaggressions to overt racial slurs in Boulder. Additionally, the city has no policy to encourage hiring people of non-white race and of Latino and other ethnicities. The racial and ethnic makeup of our city have changed little over time. Please outline 3 options which you believe could address these feelings of exclusion, ensure that more residents have a stronger attachment to our city, and make minorities and immigrants feel that they are more valued members of our community. Bob.
Again, Bob Yates. I do a lot of volunteer work, and one of the things that fills me up most is a program that I participate in through the YWCA called Reading to End Racism. And it's a really cool program. We go out to schools, K through about 5 or 6, and we sit down with kids. I was just with first graders on Thursday. And we read to them stories that reflect racism or conflict between races. And it's so satisfying to teach children about being allies, about standing up for people that are unlike them. You know, as a straight Christian, middle-aged white male, it's hard for me to understand sometimes the hurt that is imposed by racism. And so racism oftentimes is caused by ignorance and not hatred. You know, hatred is a glass full of poison. Ignorance is an empty glass. And for people like me, it's very important for us to understand the hurt that is caused by racism. And this is about education and about sharing. Thank you.
I have Ed.
Ed Jabari, yeah, I've lived in several other countries and been a foreigner who doesn't speak the language. I've had to learn about other cultures and how to communicate with people that way, and have experienced racism or discrimination as well as some welcoming cultures, so I know sort of how that works. First of all, I'd like to propose that the city joins dozens of other communities in calling Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day now. So that was yesterday. I would like to review our city policies and ordinances and enforcement data with minority groups and meaningful address any institutional racism or classism that seems to be in those. I'd champion affordability, which we'll get into some of those issues, repealing or revising the occupancy, removing or protecting the mobile home parks and supporting co-ops to make it a lot more affordable for everyone to live here. But the biggest piece of this is advocating for culture projects like my own project in North Boulder called Secret Garden, where we welcome everybody. We have events where everybody's included and we celebrate diversity.
Ed, if you want to just pass it down. It seems like everyone wants to answer, so we'll just go down.
I'll go and I'll try to answer the question as it was asked. The first thing we can do about 3 things is actually listen to the people of color, hear what their experiences are, and then we can begin to say, what do we need to change as a community in order to be more welcoming. A second thing we could do is that we have 5 times the arrest rate of people of color in Boulder as white people, where white people are like 80, more than 80% of the population, so that's a huge problem. And recently the police chief said you have to understand that those are just outsiders, people of color passing through. And so when we have that attitude in front of the Human Rights Commission, voiced by the police chief, that's a huge issue. We need to really look at how the police are trained, how the city is trained, and really increase our knowledge, increase our understanding. The third thing is that we can take the culture we do have and highlight it and bring it into the community and celebrate it not only on special days, but every day.
So we have aversive racism happening. We have inadvertent biases that are internalized being expressed. And people don't mean to be racist. So we need, first and foremost, to have ongoing trainings for staff, including police officers, to cover social justice issues and issues affecting minority groups. That was a question. So that's the most important thing. They need to be ongoing so that we are always aware and always working on ourselves. The second thing we need to do is create more opportunities for community. We need to allow people to live cooperatively. And beyond that, we need to have discussions. Like BCAR has awesome discussions. I'm almost out of time. So also having interpreters and material in other languages is really important.
Hello, Aaron Brockett here. Well, I mean, I have to confess that I'm someone sort of steeped in privilege here as a white, male, straight, cis person born into a middle-class family. I don't have all the answers here. And there are a lot of people in town like me. And I think the key here is on an individual basis is just being open to the perspectives of others and trying to actively listen and strive to make things better. So I went to a meeting of SURJ a couple of months ago and was incredibly impressed by the work that I saw people doing there in terms of examining their own prejudices and thinking about how we can be kind of white allies for people of color to make sure that we are a welcoming and inclusive community. So I think efforts like that need to be encouraged as much as possible. You know, I'll also mention, you know, housing I think is critical, that, you know, we have a lack of types of housing for living in community, and housing prices are too high. So I think working on allowing for multi-generational community housing would help with these issues as well.
Well, what a surprise. I actually am an immigrant, and my immigrant experience technically was a very easy one. But I can understand the emotional difficulties we all face when we leave our culture, we leave our family, we leave our country, and come to a strange place. I had the added advantage of actually knowing English, but I would appreciate our immigrant communities being welcomed in their own languages in Boulder. That would be a big help to help them feel welcome in our community. Most of all these immigrant communities usually have leaders, and we should encourage these leaders to enter the city processes and become advocates for their communities within our culture. And the most important thing is all ethnic communities, and in fact many other minorities, have very vibrant cultures, and they have many cultural celebrations. Let's enjoy those celebrations at all times in Boulder, not just once a year on one special day. And I think that would go a long way to explaining them to us and us to them.
So 3 things that we can do are, 1, try to go ahead and elect 6 of 9 council members by district as opposed to everybody at large. I think that will make council members more in tune with the fabric of their communities and responsible to the constituents that they've got. We need to encourage the minority populations of the city to go ahead and participate in boards and commissions, and we need to try and figure out how that can raise all the way up to the city council level, because we don't have any kind of representation at the top, and so when you don't have anything at the top, you don't get responsive down at the bottom.
No one here is born racist. There's no such thing. Racism starts from the ground up, and seriously, one of the biggest things we could be doing is after-school programs, and even during school programs, where there's like a little more teaching, a little diversity and stuff like that, because otherwise our kids aren't going to be exposed to anything until they're confronted with possibly racism dead on. With that said, another couple other things I would do is include cultural events in our farmers market every week. We should be having different cultural events using the band shell. I mean, that thing just sits there. Another thing we could be doing is have stricter punishments for hate crimes, and I was glad to be part of a precedent here in Boulder where words can be defined as a hate crime now, and words can be more hurtful than acts sometimes, and people don't understand that. And I'm glad that there's stricter punishment for that now.
Hi, Don again. Yeah, I think we are an elitist community here. There's not getting around it. But there are things we can do is to make sure that it's more inclusive. When we look at a city council that acts like a monolith, we know that not all the community is involved in that. And doing it by districts would be a way to broaden that appeal. And a way to get other people involved who don't have the time or energy or monies to be able to run for it. I've suggested in the past that we look at having a shared seat on the council that two people, just like a job share could use, and would have opportunities to get different points of view on the council at different times and get that feeling out to people. Thank you.
Chamberlain. I agree, it's an educational issue for many people. So I think I liked Keith's idea of getting the input from diverse audiences about what is wrong and what we need to do to improve. But then there needs to be a lot of cultural awareness and education. And that can be done through nonprofits. Certainly it should be done at the city. Secondly, we need to increase our hiring and recruitment of diverse people throughout the city. So one thing that should be done to start that is working with our universities, CU and Naropa. They need to offer more scholarships. And once we get people to university, then hopefully they will stay. And then we need to make a high priority as a city to hire some of the leaders from diverse candidates and encourage our nonprofits to do the same.
So Julie McCabe, so I'm currently working as a substitute school teacher in the Boulder Valley School District, and I've taught at most schools, and I would guarantee you the students under 10 years old are very diverse, and you cannot lay the line at Hispanics, Blacks, Asian. It's all over the board, and these kids are all growing up together with a very different sense of race than what we're talking about tonight. Secondly, there are suggestions now to get council out of council chambers, to develop interactive websites in different languages. And I know the Hispanic community, which I think is about 8 or 10% of the current population, they're just not visible down in the Boulder Creek Mall, that they're ready to step up. It's just that you can't go to council meetings that last all night, and you need to get council out of chambers and into the community, because those people want to be involved, and I've talked to them and I know they do.
Great, thank you so much. So we don't have time for any responses for that question. We'll move on to the next one. Again, if it seems like everyone wants to answer, we'll just go down the line. Otherwise, still raise your hand if you do have a response, and we can try stacking the responses as well. So this question is on racial discrimination and policing. So USA Today found that Boulder police have the second worst record in Colorado in terms of disproportionate rates of arrest for African Americans. It's also been our experience that certain groups feel more threatened than served by local law enforcement, including unhoused Latinos, Blacks, and Muslims. They complain of profiling and selective law enforcement, leading to tension between Boulder's police force and minority groups. However, Boulder police tell us that when they receive complaints from citizens, such as someone reporting suspicious activity, they have no choice but to respond. Unfortunately, the white majority in Boulder has a tendency to see people of color as suspicious, resulting in unnecessary police calls that also make people of color feel unfairly targeted by police. Would you support a civilian board overseeing the police in order to address complaints related to these and other issues? Why or why not?
Thank you. You know, I didn't know, and I'm not trying to be funny here, I didn't know we had enough minorities to be statistically significant for a poll for USA Today. Now, I think that's a problem that we don't have them, but I've seen what racial discrimination can do. I was living in Washington, D.C. in the early 60s. I was there when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And I was there when there was rioting in the streets when he was killed, assassinated. So I have seen what these things are, and I don't see Boulder being at that stage yet, but I do think discrimination is something you really have to stay ahead of. You have to not only be aware of it, that it's there, you have to speak up when you see it. You have to take time and tell people, I don't agree with that. Thank you.
Chamberlain, I would definitely support a civilian board to oversee the police to address the complaints. I think it's a great idea, and I think people from organizations in this room would be a great start for that commission.
So I too agree with the civilian board, but more importantly, I think it was about 2 years ago there was a study session involving whether we would hire more police in order to help with the downtown issue. And that was a decision by city council at that time. And I don't think the answer is more police. I know the county jail is under extreme pressure right now, and I think that it's about time that we begin to see it as the social question that it is, and not strictly a policing one.
We actually already have a civilian police oversight board. It's called the Boulder City Council. And if you don't like the way they've been doing their job the last few years, you can pick 5 of us up here and we'll do it better.
Would support an oversight board. I'd like to see that comprised of all people of color, maybe not even any white people on there. But I would also like to require comprehensive sensitivity training. It's also ongoing, as Chacha mentioned, for officers so they can understand what behavior is acceptable and not acceptable. Maybe they don't even know the benefit of the doubt there. And there seems to be a lack of accountability, as a lot of us have pointed out here, with respect to institutional racism and classism. And lots of our current policies and ordinances discriminate against the homeless and people of color, as we've gone through law enforcement statistics and other information. Videos that we've seen at council show that homeless and people of color are targeted and treated much differently than white people. The civilian board should have resources to encourage and reward the compassionate behavior if there are cases of that, as well as consequences, including loss of employment if they don't.
Not only must it be supported, it absolutely is necessary for the community to take charge of it. Otherwise, you have the police investigating the police, and as we've seen in the last few years, that doesn't go very well. And a lot of people end up, susceptible to police violence. A lot of people end up killed. And I myself have had the police walk in unannounced this year as a poor disabled activist. I've also had to leave my house in order not to encounter the police because my partner was having a panic attack and the center didn't know what to do except call the police. And so it's not only a matter of the police, but it's a matter of are we going to stand up and create the community that can confront the problems of the police. Because otherwise we have this issue that we encountered from the Denver Post, where Colorado is a state that catches renegade cops that have trouble in other departments, come here and continue to be very bad cops because the community doesn't do anything about it. So the answer is community. Sorry.
So in August, there was a community discussion hosted by BCAR right here, and the outcome of that was that, yes, this is what people want. The people in the community were saying that, I was at this meeting, so I heard all the groups report back, and a lot of them reported that they would like a civilian oversight committee. An important part of this, or an important reason for this, is that, like I was saying, police are not very well educated on issues of racial justice or economic justice, and they are not really set up to respond in an unbiased manner. And so we really need to have the sensitivity trainings, like I was talking about, and like I was talking about last question. And then on top of that, we need to be able to have a civilian oversight board who can ensure that police respond in correct ways, and if they don't respond in very good ways, then we need a restorative justice program for that as well, to hold the police accountable.
Yes, I certainly would support the civilian oversight board for the police. I think it's important to have civilian checks on police behavior. Of course, over the last year, we've seen incredibly horrific reports of police misbehavior. We have to make sure that if anything like that happens here in this town, we have the ability to have good and solid oversight from the civilian community. I think we also need to change how we respond to complaints, like the question you mentioned. If someone is essentially called in for walking while black, after the officer looks into the situation, there should be feedback that goes back to the person who called it in to say, look, here's what the situation was. There was no problem. We need to reevaluate why you're calling this in. So have some kind of feedback loop on those kinds of complaints as well, to make sure that the people of color in this community can walk in our town and feel safe.
I absolutely would support a civilian oversight board because, of course, the police cannot police themselves. And we have seen nationwide how people have behaved towards people of color. I'm dismayed to hear that the situation is not very good in Boulder, but at least we have not had deaths here yet. And I do not want to see that ever happen. So I believe sensitivity training is a must for the police. They need to know how to handle situations of people who look unlike them, people who they may suspect of doing something wrong simply because they're of another race or another color. And beyond that, if they do persist in behaving like that, they should be held accountable. Because without that, these behaviors will never change.
So, Michael Krutek, the first line of defense here, I think, is behavior expectations, the hiring practices, and the tone set by the chief of police and the expectations that are established for that particular person. And the oversight committee, I know a lot of large cities have these oversight committees, and I guess I'm falling in the middle place right now between an oversight committee and what Bob was stating, is that perhaps that's the role of the city council in a city this size. If that's not the case and we are too large for that kind of a practice for the city council, then I think we need to look for an oversight committee. I think it's important for an oversight committee to be objective in its perspective, and it's got to be a broad-based type of community organization. It can't just be people who want to vilify the police. And so I think it's very important that we have a balanced approach to whatever kind of community is there.
I definitely support a civilian board overseeing the police. It's rather important to have that interaction between the police and the people they're supposed to be serving. I think with the hiring practices, as Mike said, there needs to be more like of a psychological background checks as well when we do hire our police force. They do have a tendency to hire a lot of vets, which I do support, but at the same time they come back with PTSD and a lot of Islamophobia and a lot of other racism that they didn't have before, and they need to be trained back into society before they can serve the people. And I think this is an important key into getting the police to be on board with the civilians it's supposed to serve.
Thank you so much. We're going to cap that question as well. We have two more questions that we'd really like to get through until we open it up to community questions. So just a reminder, Christina, right there, has cards if you all have questions that you want to ask the candidates starting at 7:30. Go ahead and fill those out and hand them over to them.
So the next question has to do with following through on public process. In the recent housing process in Boulder, input from hundreds of participants, both within citizen working groups and neighborhood workshops, suggested that many people in Boulder are willing to consider a wider variety of tools for addressing our affordable housing crisis. Subsequently, the city faced criticism over the composition of the working groups, which, unlike most public engagement processes, closely mirrored city demographics in terms of age, income, and the proportions of house owners versus renters. Rather than acting on the public feedback received, Council has decided to address housing in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan update, which may take 2 years to complete. This extended time frame and the discounting of the outcome of the public process is discouraging to many who are not well served by the status quo and may not be able to work on the issue continuously for multiple years. This is the question. So how will you work to ensure that the past year of public process around housing in Boulder isn't swept under the rug and forgotten? More generally, how should the city respond when public engagement doesn't yield results that align with established political interests?
So it's like cha-cha, and then we'll go down that.
You can run the rest of the questions. So I was a member at one of the working groups whose time was taken advantage of. We put in hours of time, and we were told that the recommendations we had would go into potential early wins for City Council to vote on, which didn't happen. And so obviously I feel really personal about this. I think we need to value the time of our citizens, and especially if it's representative, or if it's more representative than it has been in the past. We can have the Community Foundation, who works with Boulder County, help us determine what projects we do, how representative they are. And then the leadership question was thrown in there. So I want to look at everything from a social justice standpoint, which means I want to look at who is gaining power and who is losing power in these questions or in issues. And I want to be able to speak for those who don't have as much power in society right now, and also for the goals that the Boulder Council has already put forth, as well as staff.
We're actually going to go down.
Hi, thanks. You know, your city council does not represent the people here at Boulder. They represent a small minority, and you expect them to act as that small minority would work. I'm doing what I can to get them off of here. I'm running for council, and I'm sure you'd do a lot better if you selected any of the 5 from up here who would respond much better than the city council does. Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
I agree with Don. This is a trend with this city council. Not only did they do this with the housing Boulder process, but there was a community survey done in 2014 that had a lot of incredibly great information coming from statistically valid neighborhoods within this community. And both the city and the city council basically ignored it. So I think if you want change, you need to vote for change. I would also say that I think I would, if elected, immediately reinstitute a housing Boulder process. It should not be part of the comp plan because that is too long-term in nature and too bureaucratic, I think, for what we need to do. And I would ask for key representatives from the nonprofits to be a part of that housing process. Thank you.
So the real question is, in the past, who was in charge of politics in Boulder? And I think for a long time, at least the anecdotal opinion is that Plan Boulder. And Plan Boulder has very conservative ideas right now, and I think it's the 2 ordinances on for voting 300 and 301. In terms of public process, I personally prefer on anything controversial that there be a vote. And if there is a vote and you people think you're right, then I expect you to get out the vote. And leaving it to Plan Boulder to decide everything isn't going to get the job done. So I expect the vote to come out this year.
You know, at my daily camera endorsement interview, which didn't go so well for me, one of the questions I was asked was, who runs the city? And I didn't hesitate. It's the staff, the city staff. Is that right? Of course it's not. City staff runs the city, and that's not the way it should be. City council is responsible to those who elect us. And one of the tools that council, I think, doesn't use enough is boards and commissions. Boards and commissions are people in this community who are experts, whether it's in parks or on housing or on human relations or whatever it is. And I was on the Parks Board for 4 years. I had one interaction with City Council in the entire 4 years. Human Relations Commission, the folks in the room are on that. How often do you interact with the City Council? How often do they invite you into chambers and say, hey, what's going on in the community? And so I think we really need to break down this vicious cycle of staff, council, and they live in this echo chamber, and they don't reach out to the community. Boards and commissions, we have over 100 people in the community on boards and commissions. I think it'd be a wonderful place for us to bring in to council what's really going on around us. Thank you.
I think we heard this question in another forum, but from the other angle, saying that, you know, there's been commissions that have been appointed and they don't represent the voters of that community or the people who live there. So I think it's very important to look at all these issues in a holistic way and make sure we've got representation all around. But I'm an advocate for community meetings as well, regular community meetings where, you know, people can get together and discuss the particular issues of their communities. And, you know, we'd like to see a representation of all the people, whether they're living illegally occupying places or homeowners who have valid concerns about certain things getting out of control in the neighborhood.
It's the job of City Council to represent the people. It's not the job of City Council to say, I've been on City Council for, 20 years. These are my accomplishments. I can list this board I'm on, elect me again. And so when we have this process and we have, efforts at, reaching across our diverse community, and then it's completely ignored, that is entirely the wrong thing for City Council to do. And how we be leaders is that we stop doing that. That's been my work in 8 years in Boulder. If I've interacted with the City Council, it's to tell them they're fucking up. Now I'm asking for a seat so that people can tell me, if I'm fucking up. But I'm really looking at that ground level, and I'm really looking at the community. And I was called to Dr. Merrick in my Boulder Daily Camera interview, and my only doctrine is live up to our advertisements. Since the hippie era, we've gotten to skate on being progressive and open and accepting and welcoming of everybody. And as we see tonight, we failed to do that. That's the work of City Council.
All right.
Yeah, the Housing Boulder working groups did a lot of really hard work. They had a lot of meetings. They were they had a lot of disagreements. They worked through them. They had productive discussions. I sit on the city planning board, and we got reports back from that, and we'd review it periodically, and I was always really impressed with the kind of work that was going on there. And I think that needs to move forward quickly. It should not be shoved under the rug. The work needs to be honored, and it needs to be made a critical priority of the city council. And if I'm elected at the January retreat where the city council sets its annual agenda, that will be my top priority, is to bring those housing issues to the fore and make sure we work on them quickly. I think this is your real opportunity to accomplish some change in the community, because what those priorities are at that retreat are set by who the city council members are. So please get out there and vote for people who share your values.
Well, I think when there has been so much work done by community members, it should not be ignored. But if there are other groups that feel that they have been ignored in the process, they should be included. So I would have a much wider engagement with people that has occurred with this housing process. And if we need to go back to the drawing board, we have to do that, because we cannot exclude people simply because they may not be tech savvy, or they may not be able to come out to a meeting at night, or whatever the case may be. My whole reason for running for council is inclusion, having a voice for all people in the community. So I do not at all discount the work that has been done. I just want it to be so inclusive that there can be no saying that all of Boulder has not been included in this discussion.
Hello, Michael Kruczak again. So one of the critical issues that we have here is that the staff tends to produce biased information. And I think that we struggle with that to some degree when we have community input that is contradictory to the biased information that we get from staff at the council level. When you look at the comprehensive housing strategy, there was a lot of work done, but there was also a lot of information, or a lot of pieces that were tabled because the working group couldn't necessarily agree on a lot of issues. So when we talk about specifically affordable housing, we as a community have been talking about it since 2000, when we established the 10% goal of all housing stock to be affordable housing. And we've been talking about it for a long time. We've made some progress. It's taken us 15 years to get to approximately 8%, I understand, the goal, and most of that's been in low-income housing. The reality is that we need to reestablish the goal, whether it's the correct goal or not, and if we're going to make progress, we need to decide that we're going to do that, establish goals, establish ways to get there, establish funding, and either do it or not do it. And as a community, we just need to make that decision, which is not necessarily me. We've been doing a lot of talking.
Housing is the #1 priority here in Boulder. I mean, we can all agree on that. That's really one of the key components to all the other problems. It's not going to solve everything, but it's going to help solve some of the problems, that's for sure. Like Aaron said, this needs to be a top priority at the retreat in January when they go over the year, elected or not. I'm definitely going to be helping push for the affordable housing. I'm a renter here in Boulder, so I understand from a different perspective than a lot of the candidates. And I live paycheck to paycheck, and it's not the easiest thing on the face of the planet. I had the pleasure of seeing Bernie Sanders speak the other day, and he said very clearly that we're in the middle of a political revolution, and it's really up to everyone here to put someone in office who's going to do something for them, and not just for other interests.
So this will be the last question that we ask here, and then, so this is your last opportunity to submit a question if you want a community question to be asked. If there are sheets of paper in the back, if you're interested in asking a question, we also have writing utensils back there as well. So this last question is on leadership in the face of conflict. So the city is divided right now on a variety of issues. We've adopted ambitious climate, transportation, and affordable housing goals. Unfortunately, when it comes to implementing them, there's often pushback from community members on the specific required actions. For example, last year's proposal to raise the occupancy limit for senior citizens was met by mixed public comments and the proposal was then tabled immediately after the first reading. If you get elected, nearly all of the important decisions you make are likely to upset certain populations in Boulder. Describe your leadership strategy and explain how you would stand up for the larger community-wide goals in the face of vocal opposition. Are you more inclined to do what you think is right or what you think is popular? I'm just gonna...
Firstly, looking the way I do, I've faced opposition kind of on a daily basis. People definitely have their opinions about me just by the way I look, so I understand where that comes from. But to be taken seriously and to take a leadership role, you just have to really be passionate about what you believe in. And what's right is what's ethically right for the community as a whole, and not necessarily the most popular thing, but you have to go with what's right.
So I think that the council that we have right now has been ideologically driven in a lot of council groupthink. And I think we need more independent, diverse thinking and perspective on council, which is why I'm running for city council. I am typically a data-driven, fact-based decision maker. I think that we need more data from the community when we do these polls. We should be doing more polls to the broader community so that we're getting a good cross-section of responses as opposed to just establishing working groups or hand-selected people to get us the answers that we think we want. And I am not afraid to make decisions in the face of either adversity or them being not popular. It's just, I believe that I make decisions based upon what I think is right and what is based on the data and the information that we can gather.
I believe it's a false dichotomy to say that there are city goals and there are citizens' goals, because the city is a citizen. So we need to engage the citizens to begin with in the process to understand what are the goals they identify for our city. And then they can be pursued in a manner that benefits everybody. I don't think we should force any kind of city-wide goals which have been developed without the input of all the community. I agree with Michael that we do need to be data-driven and we do need to have a very inclusive polling and surveying process so that we truly understand what it is that the community values and what it wants to pursue. And then, once we have decided on that, I don't think there should be any difficulty in pursuing that. You can have the courage to do so.
So before that decision on occupancy limits for seniors went to City Council, it came to Planning Board, and I chaired a meeting where we reviewed that proposal, and we were able to put together some kind of a compromise from the different voices on the board that would advance higher occupancy limits for seniors in at least some parts of town. And I was really disappointed when City Council wouldn't even address the issue in the face of some opposition from some members of the community. So it's critically important that we, as a council, that the council shows leadership. And that doesn't mean having a predetermined outcome and then forcing it through regardless of what people say. But you need to be able to hear all sides and pick out, when you hear some angry people, not have that veto the idea that you're pursuing. So I think the council needs to show some leadership. A piece of that is doing some focusing, because right now the council takes on a lot of really controversial topics, and there are a lot of angry people out there about a lot of things. So I'd like to see the council focus more and then show some leadership and get some real things accomplished.
A city council member's job is to move Boulder forward in a way that is best for those who live here. Sorry that I'm reading. What is right and what seems popular conflict. There's probably a system at play silencing those who want the city to do what is right. I talked about social justice in my last answer. An important addition is that people who don't have the law working for them right now. So we need to make changes. We don't have time for this exhaustive public process. I have similar goals to Boulder. I want a strict climate commitment. I want a broad transportation mode share, or a small one for cars. I want a vibrant arts and culture scene. And making decisions informed by a social justice framework provides a great path for all of these things. And it's really important that city council members, when faced with conflict, think about, okay, what can we do now to help the people who are suffering now and help laws move and progress?
As a poor, disabled, queer activist, I'm living from the root of Boulder, so I'm seeing, the poverty that's living on a disability check and a housing voucher. And so I understand what it is to be unpopular because my entire existence is unpopular, and that's fine. Right now I'm attempting to win a seat on city council so that I don't have to move to North Carolina for my partner to get the services they need. So when it comes down to doing what's right or doing what's popular, we can either live up to those things that we've gotten credit for in the magazines and in the advertisements and do what's right for everybody, or we can, continue to be a place that serves the rich and the privileged. And I am not in the category of the rich and privileged. I'd like to do what's right.
It's going to get hot on council, for sure. And I think everybody should keep that in mind. Who will actually stand up for their own values, for your values? It's been intriguing to me to see some of the other candidates' positions kind of shift, particularly on the housing occupancy limits and some other things throughout this campaign. We have a tendency that we've seen through the past few years of the city council to flip-flop when they suddenly feel that the sentiment has changed out there. I've always fought for what I believe is right. I'm doing so right now with the Cedar Garden and trying to get community cultural projects supported and funded in Boulder. And I did it with the Redwoods in Northern California before that was popular, and I'm going to fight all the way for what's right.
Doing what's right and doing what's popular don't have to be mutually exclusive. I've been a leader in a lot of areas over the past 30 years, first as a lawyer and leading my law firm, and then leading a very large company as a senior executive, and then the last 4 or 5 years serving on about a dozen civic and nonprofit boards, usually in leadership positions. And I think a leader is someone who listens, a leader gathers opinion, a leader hears good ideas, a leader makes assessments, a leader evaluates priorities, a leader makes the best judgments that he or she can for the community, and then a leader inspires the community to come together and inspires people to act. And I don't think that those things are mutually exclusive. I think that we can do what's right and what the broadest segment of the community would like us to do.
So I think this is a really tough question. I believe in representational form of government. I don't like the idea that we would Twitter our way through to decisions. I think that much of what goes on in local government is by access. And I think that the right-sizing turnaround is an example of something that happened and that City Council responded to in a way that I think they were being honest about. I think they felt that the public reaction to it was too negative. I'm not sure how you get representational agreement in the city of Boulder because we are very polarized. And I think 300-301 is an example of that polarity. Right now, everything west of Broadway is costing about $1 million to buy into. And those kinds of prices affect everything in the community in terms of what you can afford. So how much we're going to pay to be diverse, both in population and in housing, is a big question, and it's going to take a lot of debate.
Hi, Jan Burton. My philosophy about being on council would be to represent the entire community. And I have been a leader for the last 30 years. I think the starting point is to gather input from as many sources as possible. And that includes things like community surveys. And I think I'm the only one here who's actually read the survey. So gathering input from all parts of the community and then making a decision based on good education and facts. Then it was mentioned conflict management. I've seen this in some of the nonprofits that I've been a part of. People do not like conflict, so they run away from conflict. And I don't believe that's the right way to manage anything, because we all have conflict. Even two people in a room have conflict. So I would encourage the council to go through some sort of training on how to deal with conflict and how to stand with their decisions.
Thanks. I'll keep this short and to the point. I'll do what's right, but it's not right if it doesn't agree with what the people who are affected want. I've pissed a lot of people off in my career, and I plan to keep doing it.
Thanks, Don. All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to move into community questions. And how this is going to work is we have 5 questions that we're going to read through. We'll have the first 3 people who raise their hands and want to respond they have a minute to respond, and then we'll have time for 2 additional comments. All right. So the first question is, please ask all the candidates to just raise their hands up. So raise your hand if you support 300 and 301. Raise your hands if you oppose 300 and 301. That was the question. More of a statement, really.
I have one more combination here.
I oppose
You have one more combination.
301.
Do you want to see?
So I'm 50-50. No, we just you didn't give that option. So just let
Sorry.
me know. I'm for 301.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question is, again, about 300 and 301. How do you believe 300, 301 would affect economic and social justice in Boulder? Bob, Julie, Ed. We'll open that up.
You know, 300 and 301 remind me of that 1991 Jim Carrey movie, Dumb and Dumber. I can't figure out which one's which. I think they will dramatically and radically impact our community. It is a white, elitist, closed-door way to protect the people who have it, and those who don't won't be getting it. I'd be happy to, I can't do this in a minute because I'd be happy to talk to you. I could talk about hours about 300 and 301 and why that would be bad for our community, for all of us in the community, whether you have stuff, whether you don't have stuff. These are absolutely horrible. I don't care who you elect here, but please, please do not vote in favor of these ballot measures. They're very, very bad for our community.
Julie and Ed. I think in terms of 300, that giving neighbors right to vote does sound appealing, but basically what would happen is that you would end up with the city being even more divided than it is now. An example is the homeless shelters that were congregated out on Lee Hill and Broadway. And the neighbors up there resented what they saw congregation, although I think the city's attitude was that it grouped together some of the resources. At some point, some things are going to happen in the city that you're not going to agree with. I think the big question is are we going to be more dense, and how are we going to deal with transportation if that's the direction we go?
Sorry, Ed was next.
Again, I'm one of the few supporters of 300 and 301 right now. I think worst case for me is that we don't get diversity on city council and these things don't pass, because then we're going to see a huge slew of development without a lot of community benefit with that. But that being said, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about the 2 measures. 301 would give us actually funding, a mechanism to fund more affordable housing, more community projects out there. It doesn't apply to every zoning, and it doesn't apply to commercial, industrial that's next to the community or residential zoning. Either way, I think the better question to be asking all of us up here is whether these pass or not, how do you address the concerns? So if 300, 301 pass, how would I address NIMBYism? How would I address inclusivity? Those are more relevant questions than just making a decision based on whether the candidate supports these measures or not.
So we're going to do Jan, and then Michael, and then we'll do.
Boulder Housing Partners has said that if these 2 are passed, that there will be a moratorium on building. And so what the problem that we already have, I think we've all agreed, the number 1 problem we have in this town is what? Affordable housing. So the direct effect, said by them, is that housing will stop, and so housing will continue to go up. In addition, if there if developers are stopping development, then that means the city is not going to have those taxes coming in, right? So that means property taxes are probably going to go up for individuals. So it's a very dangerous slope that we're getting on with both of those.
I tend to believe that 300 and 301 are a manifestation of the frustration that the community's been feeling about council decisions recently. I think that the better way to address these issues, and they do need to be addressed, is by electing council members by district. I think that it brings home the notion of the community being in touch with the representatives a little bit better, well, if not a lot better, and that we then get better representation for those communities on council. They can bring the perspective and the ideas of that community to the council decisions in the council chambers, and I think it's a much better solution than 300 and 301, which are very, very bad policy because they will be put into the charter, cannot be changed easily, and will effectively shut the town down.
Yep, and then Cha-Cha.
Well, I do support 300 and 301, and I don't see them as dumb and dumber. I see them as a way for us to be heard. And certainly 300 will support neighborhoods' right to vote. And why are we assuming that all the neighbors in Boulder are so bad that they will not accept any difference in their communities? You see in Martin Acres a ready-to-work house, which was established because the people of the ready-to-work house went there and engaged with the community. So if the neighborhood has a right to think about it, they may well accept many more things than you imagine that they might. And 301 will bring development to the point that they support our affordable housing programs and support many other things in the community that we need for the health and welfare of this community, like schools, roads, libraries, traffic mitigation, fire and safety.
Cha-Cha, then we're going to move on to the next question.
I ditto what Bob said and just want to add that for 300, it seems like it'd be a socially just thing to do because it's asking people to decide what they want. What it ends up doing is giving power to people who have traditionally had power, and passing it would go on silencing the silence to keep the high ground.
Okay, so the next question is, if you supported setting aside places for people to camp, how would you address concerns of people who live and or own homes near established camping areas?
I'll go quick. There's something that I think would be controversial on city council that I'd like to look at, which is an ordinance that addresses the impacts of the large houses with very few people living in them. The tax on those situations, which the homeowners could obviously afford, would go a long way towards solving our affordability and homelessness issues, and de-incentivize the scraping of existing homes to build McMansions and change the character of neighborhoods.
When I think about camping questions, I'm reminded that a lot of places have great camping and a lot of places have great weather. Few of them have as lucky weather as Boulder, and we could actually set up a camping season where those that could pay could actually pay, set up and do camping, and then we've got money both for those that might need to camp and can't pay, but also for cleanup of these problems. We have to remember that campers, including those that do it because they're unhoused, are community members. They often work here, they often love it here, they often contribute here. So we have to bear that in mind when we answer camping questions.
So at the study session that I attended 2 years ago, and it was the police with city council, they identified down in Denver, I think they're called the Denver 500, and up here in Boulder it's some other number. But it's basically the tip of the iceberg, and it's the people that we are most familiar with who are on the street corners or in the parks. But underneath this very small group of people who are the ones that cause the most problems in terms of mental illness, addiction, emergency visits, is this huge other piece of the iceberg. And it's like the kids who were left homeless from the floods out in Longmont. The numbers were astounding. And so what we've done is we've focused on this very top, most visible group, when in fact there's this huge undercurrent of people that are now what I would call the new subculture, and they're the homeless. And I think we really have to decide on our priorities and how we're going to deal with it. And one of the things is the county jail needs to be funded better, and we need to turn policing into social services.
We have time for two more.
I like Bob's answer earlier. And we have all those parks. Let's create a camping place for people to go. I think we do have enough parks in this community that we could find a place for the campers to go.
Anyone else have a response to this question? Okay. All right. Thanks. So the next question is, one of the ongoing challenges with the council has been citizen engagement, specifically how citizens who cannot attend city council meetings can be heard. How will you expand how citizens engage with the council? What tools do you use to get feedback and input? What's your Twitter handle? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We probably have time to go through.
Okay. I think we have time for everyone if everyone wants to. We'll start with Tom.
My Twitter handle is @BoBYatesBoulder. Please tweet out whatever I said that sounded intelligent. If it sounded not so intelligent, please don't write it down.
It's already happened.
Wouldn't be the first time. I'm sorry, what was the question? I got wrapped up in the Twitter thing.
What's your Twitter handle?
What was it? Oh, engagement. Okay. Sorry. I have a lot of ideas on engagement. I'll rattle through them real quick. I hate city council meetings. I hate the fact that you all have to go up there, you're supplicants, you get 3 minutes and then shut up and sit down, right? That's horrible, okay? City council meetings should be in the community. They should be in this room. It should be in churches throughout the community. We should have Spanish translators. We should have people in dialogue around the table with council members and real life human beings. We should have city council meetings on Saturdays and Sundays when people can attend. Those are a couple of ideas. There's lots more things let's talk about at the back of the room, but I hate the way that they're conducted right now, and we need to make this a community dialogue, community engagement. Thank you.
Is that okay? My handle is Chaspinrad, CHASPINRAD, and we need to be streaming and subtitling all boards and commissions meetings. We need to be providing interpretation at meetings for those who want it. We need to have set agenda times so that people know when they can show up for the meeting that they want to hear about. We need to engage in other methods as well. Right now, the city has social media accounts, but they're very not responsive. So when we tweet at the city of Boulder or when we send them a Facebook message, there needs to be a response coming back. There need to be people in charge of that and making sure that there's a dialogue. And then, like Bob was saying, bring meetings to the people, have more discussions, community discussions. You suggested actually office hours.
Office hours.
That's a great thing. I support that.
Thanks, Dad.
So my Twitter handle is AaronBrockett12, and a big thanks to everybody here who's live tweeting. We were at a candidate forum last night at Fraser Meadows retirement home, which was a great event, lots of great people there. No live tweeting. Honestly, I think Twitter is kind of the best thing that's happened to public meetings, and since I don't know what, it allows people to engage dynamically during the meeting, at least amongst themselves. And actually, I feel like I can skip a council meeting and just follow the live tweeting and get a great summary of what's going on. So that's great. We need to value that kind of input, similarly to the way that we value people coming and being in person and speaking their mind there. But we also need to make that piece easier. So I love the fact that childcare was offered tonight. I don't know if anybody's taken me up on it, but it's a great idea. We should do that at city council meetings as well. We should make sure that there's some kind of food option available, even if it's only you can bring your lunch or dinner, because you can't sit through a 7-hour meeting and not have a little bit of food. So there are a lot of ways that we need to make the council meetings more accessible to people.
Well, I totally agree with everything that has been said here. This time I actually agree with every word that Bob said. My whole reason for running is to engage the people. I've been to many meetings in the past year, and I get up and I make my 3-minute statement, and after that, nothing happens. It has no effect upon what the policy was that was being discussed. So I think we should have outreach to people in every method possible. Oddly enough, this streaming video that we have, people can watch it on Channel 8, what goes on in meetings, and my 88-year-old neighbor who has lived in this city for 60 years and knows more about Boulder than most of us have forgotten. She is totally engaged because she can watch what goes on in city council meetings on Channel 8. So we should use every method possible and not exclude anybody. I have just put an ad in the paper saying that if I am elected to council, I will have an open house in my home every month. And you can come and tell me what your concerns are. I may even give you some good Indian food.
So it's interesting, at all these forums, whether it happened to be at Fraser Meadows, whether it happened to be, we've had one a night for 3 weeks, but this question has always come up, and it doesn't make a difference whether it's the elderly, whether it's the tech savvy, whether it's the non-tech savvy, whether it's the young, whether it's the immigrants, and I think it's just a pervasive question, which to me means that we've probably got a problem here that hasn't been addressed. So I do like all of the things that have been addressed here, but I do think that we need to make fundamentally city council more approachable. And so the 2 things that I will add to that is that we should do coffee with council and brews and views. So we should select a brew pub once every other month and just essentially have brews with the council and talk about issues in the city.
So yeah, samesies, totes, all that stuff. I don't have a Twitter account, I don't really tweet or anything, but I do encourage it. I think it would be an important part if we had a podcast for every one of our city council meetings, so that way people could ask live questions and we could have a liaison who actually picks those questions out and asks the city council and kind of filters through, so it's not like, you know, some irrelevant questions or obscene questions, because I'm sure those slip through from time to time. Another thing is just, you know, city council members engaging their community. I mean, really just going out and hanging out. We live in a great town where everyone's approachable. I mean, it doesn't hurt to just talk to everyone and anyone. And the brews thing, I like it.
Keith and then Ed.
Okay, so my Twitter is @ComradeKeith, and one thing that I would try to do different if I were on city council is that recently I was in a city council meeting concerning enforcement of a certain policy that I don't like very much, and a lot of people didn't like it. It went for 3 hours or 4 hours over time, and then Councilman Shoemaker said, "It's astounding. We spent all these hours and all these people spoke about their fear about co-ops, and it wasn't even the issue." And that is totally the wrong approach, because when that many people show up, that's the issue. So it's really about empowering the people and letting the people speak for what the issues are. I'm going to be sitting in a seat as opposed to not sitting in a seat, hopefully, and that's going to be an interesting perspective, but it's really about you. And I'll come to you, and you can come to me, and that's what I'll provide. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've all got great ideas on this. I'd like to espouse all those, and you know, we can't engage the public too much. I'd be in favor of, however we make contact with people, give them an option of how they would be engaged, whether it's people who don't get out of their homes, somebody coming to their home to bring them information. I think, or any of these things. I don't tweet, but I do other social media. And, you know, there are surveys that need to get out. We need to get more public input, period. Community meetings, again, once a month. Those kind of things actually need staffing, need some funding through the city to do, as well as council agendas have to be known a lot earlier. You know, there's sometimes I see agendas where items come out the day before or something, and then often, particularly from city attorney's office, there's nothing there, and then there's suddenly issues that they're talking about at the council, and people don't have representation to be there.
So I think anything that informs citizens, no matter how it's done, is the correct way. In terms of Twitter, I do have a Twitter account, but to be honest, I've been too busy to even look at it, so I don't pay any attention. I have thought that an interactive map for land use changes would be really great. I recently tried to find out something about the Google project, and it took me a week to get a hold of the project manager. And it was numerous emails, and it would be really great if the city of Boulder had better websites, and if you went in and you took a look at a map and you could see where the projects were, and you would link on it, and it would open up and it would tell you what was going on. The thing that I'm most confused about is what happened on right sizing, because apparently they got a ton of emails and it made them change their mind. And so was that representative democracy? Is that what we're talking about? That is a very confusing process. I would have allowed it to go forward at least until completion, but something happened that made them cut it off. So I don't get it.
Jan Burton, CO, is my Twitter handle. I want to give one call out to the city government for an application called Inquire Boulder. Has anyone heard of it? I've gotten some good reports that people have actually reported some issues through this application, and they get feedback and get the problem solved. So that's one thing that we should all look to using. I think everyone's had great ideas that we should consider. I also think that for parents with children, a good place to have meetings or feedback sessions would be at schools, because that's kind of the center of their universe if they've got kids in schools. And also, I think there are things that should be done perhaps on CU campus with university students to train them about certain things like bear issues and trash and that kind of thing that might kind of cut some things off in the beginning. Thanks.
Thanks. You know, I feel you all should be proud that you've got such a good group of people up here that are want to represent you, and they want to make sure that they are inclusive with everything that's going on. So I'm very proud of all of them, and I think you should be as well.
We're proud of you, Don.
Oh, shit.
Okay, this will be the last question from the community. We're going to cap this at 5 minutes and then hopefully have about 5 to 10 minutes for final remarks. So affordable housing for low and very low income members of our community is an important problem, but we also face a shortage of middle income housing for teachers and service workers. This leads to traffic, congestion, and high GHG emissions. What do you think is the best solution to this middle income housing and environmental problem? What would be actionable?
Okay, so I can only go upon the Daily Camera numbers, but apparently according to the Daily Camera, we have 6,300 housing units left to develop, about 18,000 jobs, with the potential for another 34,000 jobs, I guess depending on changes. I am now advocating for us to look at Boulder County as an interactive whole. We are connected by housing, roads, and jobs. One of the things that we need to do is solve the commute. I don't know if you all know, but we send RTD 2014 $43.6 million for 2014 alone. The City of Boulder non-maintenance budget, this is for things like transportation demand management, was $1.2 million. You have to ask yourself, what are we getting from RTD? 75% of the traffic congestion is caused by single occupancy vehicles. RTD only handles about 7% of the mode share. We have a big problem with RTD, and we need to have a community-wide discussion about it. And along the way, we're going to have to decide what we're going to do about congestion on our own, because I don't think RTD will be helping us out anytime soon.
Thanks, Jan Burton. So first of all, we definitely need to build density in this community. So what has been begun at Boulder Junction needs to continue. And there need to be sub-community plans made in place with neighborhoods so that these things are bought in by the neighborhoods. I also think we need to work with CU because CU needs to be part of the planning process for student housing. We need to look at all of our zoning for things like accessory dwelling units, tiny homes. It's a movement, several million large, and we are not even talking about it. And then finally, we need to look very creatively at co-housing and other things like that should be accepted fully. Thank you.
So housing is pretty important to all of Boulder. It was very important to me coming in on a disability check and needing a housing voucher. And at the time I got that voucher, they said it'll be 13 months, but at the end of it, you'll get a voucher. Now, in order to eliminate the waiting list, which is generally a good thing not to have long waiting lists where people aren't being served, they have a process called the lotto, where you might, put your application and get a number, but then there's 2 years that elapse before there's housing available. So we have to look at making a voucher system that works. We have to be willing to legalize the right to live here in the form of co-ops, in the form of camping, in the form of tiny houses. We have to be open to the positives of density, which are community, neighborhoods, and culture. And I know it can be scary, but if we want to create the place that we're trying to create, we need to really create it.
This will be the final comment on this question, and then we'll do 30 seconds for closing remarks.
So I think the way that we get housing that's more affordable to middle-income folks is to change our regulations to encourage housing types that are more affordable. Currently, our regulations encourage larger, more expensive units. And what we need to do is change those regulations to incentivize the creation of smaller units, and also ones that aren't required to have a parking spot that comes with them. So if we allow for new development in places where you can walk and bike and take the bus almost everywhere, then you don't necessarily need a parking spot. You can save on your rent that way. We should also look at creating housing types that are attractive to families, but that aren't single-family homes, so that they're more affordable. Things like townhouses and duplexes, built with good common green spaces, good communities, such that we can attract families at affordable prices that they can live here in town and not have to commute from many miles away.
Okay, so 30 seconds for closing remarks. We'll raise our hand when you have 10 seconds left, and if you could just state your first and last name before you start.
I'm Jared Kashuba again, and basically I'm running for city council to kind of represent a working class, but also we keep talking about a middle income, and we keep forgetting about the lower income. I mean, a lot of people say that there's a higher income and the middle income, but there's us lower income people that live paycheck to paycheck, and we want to live here too. Anyway, I'd like to just really represent people of Boulder, and I believe it's city council's responsibility to serve.
Michael Krutek. I'm running for city council because I don't even think we have the right debate going on in city council at the moment. And so what I want to bring is diversity of thought and debate to the city council. I want to move away from the groupthink that we tend to have managing the city and making decisions on an ideological basis and an ideological basis primarily. So I think that what we need to do is move away from the loudest voices in ideology and have better debate about issues.
Well, I'm just going to answer the housing question here because I have friends all over town. And
So your first last name.
My name is Jyotsna Raj, and I'm just going to talk about housing a little because I have friends all over town and they live in different ways. Two of my friends actually live in mobile home parks, and they live very happily there. And they are this middle income family that we are talking about. My friend is a photographer, a very accomplished one with pictures in many exhibitions, and she's a teacher. And she told me that she earns $80,000 a year, but she can only afford to live in Boulder in a mobile home park. So let us look at all kinds of solutions for this population who wants to live in Boulder and needs to live in different ways.
Aaron Brockett again. Just a little bit more about myself. I live up in the Holiday neighborhood in a townhouse there with my wife and 2 kids who are 9 and 12. I own a small software firm there. My wife and I co-own it, and it's across the street from our house, so I commute to work every day. So, on foot in a very short commute. So anyway, thank you so much for coming out, and for all these organizations for having us. The questions here have been a real refreshing change of pace from our other forums. I really appreciate you bringing that perspective into the City Council race, so thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Cha-Cha Spinrad. I want to thank BoCHA and Boulder Rights Watch and BCAR and SURJ and Family Learning Center for putting on this event. I think it's really important. This is the type of politics that I really appreciate. I really appreciate getting nonprofits who care about our community to be involved and to work toward a better Boulder. Did not mean to do that. Yeah, better Boulder. My flyers are in the back. I have new flyers. And vote for me, Cha-Cha Spinrad.
Hello, I'm Comrade Keith Percy, and as I hope I've articulated well, I'm really running from a place of voice unheard in present city government, and I'm running recognizing that a lot of my friends from further marginalized communities, whether that's of color, whether that's homeless and poorer than myself, whether that's trans, they're running away. And rather than run away, I'd like to create a Boulder we can all live in. I hope you'll check out keithkersey.com, perhaps propose platform points if you think I'm missing things, and consider voting for me. Thanks.
Again, Ed Jabari, thank you all for coming out tonight. And I am running because I'm frustrated with the current city council. I'm also seeing these large development forces descending on our city. I don't want to be too fear-based, but I've seen it happen in a lot of places, and I think we can do a lot better here. I can delve into things from an engineering standpoint and really understand and be transparent about presenting that back to the public, engage the public. Through my experience, I feel like I've gained a lot of compassion and can represent everyone from the homeless to everyone else that's out there.
You know, when you do this, when you run for, oh, I'm sorry, my name is Bob Yates. Did I come to my time? My name is Bob Yates. When you do this, you find out some things about yourself. People tell you about you. Some of them are not things you want to hear. But one of the nice things that people said to me along the way, have said to me along the way, is that I'm a good listener, I guess. And so that's my commitment to you. If I'm elected to council, I will listen to all of you. I will be available to you. I will listen to you. I will hear you, and I will try to act on your behalf. You know, this is kind of a job interview, and I'm hoping that you'll hire me for the job if you like what I said. Oh, and if you want to continue the conversation, I'm going to go to Shine afterwards. If anybody wants to have a beer, we can keep talking. Thanks.
That'd be pretty cheap. I'm Julie McKay, and I've heard over and over that I'm a single issue candidate, and it's not true. But I'm going to take my final time to tell you my idea. If we go forward with eco-passes, RPD wants another $22 million for countywide eco-passes. That would be $66 million a year to RTD for what would maybe be 10 to 12% of the mode share. Instead, I recommend that we look at purchasing our local fare box. Longmont had theirs for a year for $200,000. That would give us a spine, and then we could do technology solutions for other things like microtransit, GPS, real-time sourcing, interactive computer programs to build transportation.
Jan Burton, thanks everyone for coming out. This has been a great forum. Really appreciate those of you who put it on. I co-founded a company last year called Rhino Cubed, and we make small, tiny, artistic houses from shipping containers. So I've put my money where my mouth is in terms of both the environment and affordable housing. If you vote for Jan Burton, I promise I will listen to you, I will act for you, and I will be convicted with my decisions and stick with them. Thank you.
I'm Don Cody, and I'm running because I don't feel that this council represents us. And I want to make sure that everybody here in the city is represented. So thank you. Look for me at the bottom of the ballot. I was going to say the rear end, but that has other implications. So just look at the bottom of the list. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Can I just say my Twitter handle? I'm still not used to it. But I'm getting used to it. I like it. Raj for council.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to pass the mic over to Zane.
So thank you so much for coming. We had a pretty full house there at some point earlier in the evening, which is great. We are going to write this up, and Jez has been filming it, and we're going to post the video on our website where we posted all the questions and the contact information, including Twitter handles, Facebook pages, and websites for all the candidates who RSVP'd. So if you want more information, please go there. And if you didn't have a chance to already and you would like to get notified when we've got this stuff up, you can sign in on the sign-in sheets at the door. And we hope that you'll follow along with us going forward as BoCHA and the other organizations that helped us put this on continue engaging in city politics and really trying to get as many diverse voices involved as possible. So thanks so much for coming.
Yeah. Well,
problem is my
Okay, good.
tweet deck runs so slowly, probably because like I have a billion things like shooting